Welcome to Talking Heads on USA Global TV, starring the one and only wonderful Dr. Jacalyn. It's a prestigious place where world-class influencers and experts meet, and where you'll find the most trusted advisors and coaches for all things in life and business. Visit usaglobaltv.com to sign up for our newsletter, get the value you need, and be first in line to learn about events and giveaways and other valuable content. Connect with us. Email Dr. Jacalyn at usaglobaltv.com to talk about how you can become part of USA Global TV. That's USA Global TV, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday or happy Saturday, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us on USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. I'm the president, founder, and chief listening officer here at our network. Our show today is The Listening Mentor. This is a show where we together, myself and my co-host, Heward, we look at various scenarios regarding listening and communication skills. And our goal is to help give you tips to take away and strategies to implement to be a more effective listener and overall communicator. So let's welcome the star of our show. She's the Harley Street stress expert, helping people bust their stress. It's Heward. Join us from London. Hello.
Hello. Always good to be here.
Well, it's nice to have you with us. And of course, I want to take a moment and just reflect. How are you feeling? How are things going for you with the Queen's passing? You're right there in the heart of London. Tell us what's going on.
I switched on the news because I had a feeling that something was, I needed to watch the news. And they were saying that the Queen was not well. And then I heard the announcement, the official announcement that the Queen had died. And I have to be honest, I just literally burst into tears because I've known her all my life. I've grown up with her, and I don't know what our world will be like without her. And I feel the same for many people, that it's all we've ever known. So a world without our Queen, I don't know, because she's just always been there. So there is a feeling of grief, an outpour, as a feeling of disbelief, because I thought, well, she would just keep going on. She was 96, and it was her time. But there is a mourning period, and I feel that I'm in that, as many other people are in this country.
Thank you, Caroline. I really appreciate you sharing that. I was on the film and music show with Madeline when it came across my phone that she had passed away, and I just started to cry. And then I told Madeline, she started to cry. And, we have our show here at the United Kingdom News and Culture, and we're very blessed to have Ian Pelham-Turner, Helen Ashard, and Simon McDonald, who are expert correspondents there in the UK. And they've been close to the Queen in many ways in terms of their years of service and the things that they've been doing. So it really rang true for me as well. So may she rest in peace. And today's subject is about hearing, about listening, about interpreting. And I'll give you an example. The news was on, and someone told me they thought that someone else had passed away. It wasn't the Queen. What they heard from the news was something different. And although that sounds extreme, this happens all the time when someone's saying something, and whether it's literally that you're listening and you're not hearing the words, or you are hearing it and you're taking it and putting it into some other context. And it reminds me, when I was growing up, of that game Whisper Down the Lane. Did you play that?
Well, something not too dissimilar. We called it Chinese whispers.
and so for anyone who doesn't know about this, one person says something and it gets passed on from person to person to person. And by the time it gets to the last person, it's usually something completely different than what the first person said. So that's why it's vitally important to be listening and fully present. Before we go into our discussion for today, tell people about the work that you do as the Harley Street stress expert and how you help them bust their stress.
Thank you. I work with people all manner of people from all sorts of backgrounds to literally bust their stress. My background is in chakra psychology, so how the mind and body connects and what happens to the person physically, emotionally, mentally, behaviorally when there's an imbalance. The imbalance is the symptom. It's whatever you're complaining about, whether it's relationships, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, like stress, sleep problems, depression, anxiety. So whatever it is that's in your space that you're complaining about is what I can help you with. I actually had somebody very recently come to see me, and she had a problem with nightmares, and I literally bust their stress by identifying root cause of what causes the symptom that's presenting, that's causing the stress, or the symptom that's causing the problems. And identifying root cause literally lifts the emotion, allows the emotion to surface and release, so the person feels better. And sleep then is much better. And I've had feedback from that person that sleep has been incredible in this since she's had her session. And so it doesn't matter what it is that you're suffering from. I literally help you work through and release without all the story and without all the detail, releasing the emotion that caused the initial trauma.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And we do have on the screen here about your course, Chakra Psychology, and where people can book in. Can you give a little bit of information about what people can expect by taking this course?
Yes, you'll get a very interesting and quick understanding of the 7 major chakras and an experience of going through a balancing and a clearing of the 7 major chakras. It is frequency generated, it is an activation, there is sound, and there is different things inside of the course that's not just about the education. That's an activation. It is something that will change the way you're experiencing, as well as help you understand why things are the way they are. So it gives you a nice, good understanding of the 7 major chakras, where they are, what they're related to, and a healing experience and activation as well.
And Caroline, how long is this course, please?
It's 30 minutes. So in 30 minutes, you're going to get an extraordinary experience and an extraordinary life education that perhaps you didn't have previously.
All right, fabulous. There you have it, folks. If you're listening on the radio or on a podcast later on, the link is Dr. Jacalyn, DrJacalyn.thinkific, THINKIFIC.com/courses. All right, Caroline. So our discussion today is about listening, being fully present, as opposed to taking what someone says and interpreting it in our own words to mean whatever it is that we think the other person conveyed. So this is actually somewhat challenging for people because they're listening to what you're saying and then they're putting it into language they understand. So as a therapist, as someone who's trained, how is it that people can first start to break this pattern of dysfunction?
We listen generally through our own filters. So we're listening almost for what we want to hear. And the person that thought, taking your example of the person that thought that somebody else had died, is because it would have been too difficult for them to comprehend that the Queen had died. And so they didn't want to hear that. So they were listening for something else. And this is what we do if we find the information too difficult to comprehend or to digest, that we listen for what we want to hear. So if we don't want to do something, we hear all the reasons why we shouldn't be doing something. And if we want to do something, we will hear all the reasons why inside, if we have that inner voice saying it's not going to work, it won't work, why are you doing this? But we want to do it, that inner voice usually wins. And so we'll find the conversation or what we hear is to what's working through our own filter. So if we don't want to do something, really, we will get all the reasons why not to do it. And it's not that we're doing something wrong or something right. We're listening through our own filters of our own story. So the way to get over this is to listen actively, to literally listen with all of our intention, all of our attention on the person, all the physiology, the changes, the gestures, the sensory, using all of your sensory acuity, what you see, what you hear, and the gestures and the tone of the voice, so that you're really 100% present with them, and then you will hear what was meant to be heard.
Thank you, Caroline. I agree with you. I also like to, after I've been fully present listening, Caroline, what I just heard you say was this. And it's interesting using that technique, how many times people miss the mark or they were spot on. But then the other person knows, okay, we have a gap here. Something isn't clicking between the two of us in terms of communication. And I think many times in a personal relationship, this can be an open door where you realize, okay, this is why we're not getting along, because you thought what I said was this, but actually it was this. And to me, it's good to clear the air so that we can understand, okay, you're over here and I'm over here. How do we get to meet in the middle or not?
Well, when somebody comes back to me, what I call it clarifying and confirming. When somebody clarifies and confirms what I've just said, I know they're doing it because it's a technique that they've picked up, because they know they don't always hear everything. And so when somebody's clarifying and saying, well, what I just heard is this, 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 and this, and I just heard this, and I said, you know what, we're going to be here for a couple of hours if you clarify and confirm everything that I've said. And it is a strategy, a technique that some people that realize or have a complete awareness that they do miss things or do misinterpret things or misunderstand what's being said, they are using that as a technique to make sure they have heard what was said. So in some ways, I think it's good. And in other ways, it can make the conversation very laboriously long.
Well, it's actually a technique that I used in corporate America that we were trained on. So if you're meeting with a C-level executive or someone and you need a couple seconds to gather yourself or to come up with an answer, you basically just take that time. What I heard you say is this, this, and this. And while they're reflecting on it, then you're moving forward with your next, but then you're not actually listening at the same time. So it's kind of tricky.
That's really interesting you say that. And I want to like labor that and give you some feedback on that point. I generally say to people that are clarifying and confirming back to me that is their think time. That is, sort of, they're giving themselves space to think and work out what they want to say back. And so they clarify, confirm everything back to you to give them some space. And what you've just clarified to me is exactly that it is a technique that gives you space to think.
All right. I'm in agreement with you there. So when we think about misunderstandings, misinterpretations, these things go on all the time. It just happened to me last weekend, and we can't possibly know what the other person's thinking, but because one party or the other misinterprets, misunderstands, it can lead into a very uncomfortable situation, because we don't know why the other person did what they did or why they said what they did or didn't say. But we can control how we react to it. And I think that's the big takeaway, that we need to keep saying to ourselves, okay, because XYZ is acting in this manner or said this, doesn't mean that I have to be a mirror and reflect what it is that they're doing. What are your thoughts about that?
That's beautiful. And I genuinely agree with you, because it's not about what we think they've said. It's about our reaction, our response and our reaction to what we've heard, what they've said. And it is 90% our reaction creates our own inner experience and our external experience of the other person. So it's very important to reflect or be still rather than react straight away. especially if we're going to react in a conflict way, because it might be that we've misunderstood and thought it was a conflict response, whereas it wasn't. And when there's ever a situation where I thought, well, that was a bit off, and I didn't like the way that you said that, I usually go quiet, reflect, make sure that I've understood, especially if I'm reading something and there's no tone in terms of voice behind it. I make sure that I'm responding from a place where I'm not responding from a conflict place, that I'm responding from a place where I'm calm, so that I don't misinterpret anything that I'm reading or I'm hearing.
Caroline, when you are interacting with someone and they're not a therapist, they're not a trained professional, and you're both seeing things from a different perspective, are you able to take off your therapist's hat and look at it from a different perspective, or do you typically go into what it is you've been trained to do?
It's a good question. I don't generally go into reaction. Sometimes I'm human and sometimes it happens, so I'm not, I'm not a robot, so if somebody says something and I feel genuinely upset by what I've heard, sometimes it's really hard for me to not react, but, so I'm being honest in that response there. But there are many times that I will check in, I call it, I'm checking in to make sure that I'm responding in the best way possible. And it's so easy to just go in and respond, and it's much better at times when we do feel that it's a confronting situation, that it's better to be silent, to take a check-in, and then to respond from a different place. And a lot of times I go into a place of silence because I'm not sure how to respond. I don't want to cause a situation for myself or the other person. So if I'm in a conflict situation, I genuinely feel uncomfortable. So I will go silent. And if I've responded and it's come out before I can stop myself, and sometimes that happens, and I'll just bite back and I'll think, oh, why did I do that? And then I won't continue in it. So yes, I've caught myself, sort of literally responding straight away and then thinking, oh, why did I do that? So in answer to your question, we're all human, and I feel that I'm probably more human than most people because I'm very aware. I'm extremely aware of how I'm being to myself and to others. And that doesn't stop me reacting when I'm not supposed to react at times, because we're all real.
So true. It's so true. Thanks for sharing that. Last weekend, I went for a walk. I usually walk 8 miles on a Saturday and then also on a Sunday. And I like to stop at this little deli on the way back and get my little guilty pleasure sandwich after I've been fasting for so many hours. Anyway, long story short, I was online and there was a guy who was at the register, and then there was a woman who had her things on the counter, and then there was me. So another cashier on the other side of the store came up and said, hey, I'm opening up over here if you want to go over. So I naturally looked at the woman in front of me to see if she was going to, but she just stood there. So I was like, okay, I take my little sandwich and I go over. So now that woman has left that line and she's now over where I am. And another woman whom I never saw before, she has all of these sandwiches, and she apparently is with this other woman. So they now meet in the middle, and the sandwich woman says, she's so rude. So I turn around and I said, I'm sorry, are you speaking about me? And she said, yes, you're rude. And I said, I really apologize. I don't know what I'm rude about. I guess you two are friends. You were over there. I said, why don't you please? I picked up my sandwich and I said, why don't you please go? I didn't see you making any movement. So therefore I went. So she said, no, it's okay. So I said, no, please. So the cashier's like, would someone please and go up? So I'm still standing. So I put my food up. So now I turn around and I said to the sandwich woman, I said, I am not rude. I apologize again. but your friend was not moving, and I don't know where you came from because you weren't online, so I apologize. Neither one of them would even look at me. So I took my sandwich outside, and I thought to myself, I don't know what else I could have done. And I was starting to take it personally. And I thought we were not on the same communication at all in that instance. And something that seems so innocent came as something that you had three people probably walk away from and not feel good. And that's just such a small, silly example.
It's not so silly because that happens all the time. You know, I certainly have had an experience of not something not too dissimilar in a queue, and then I noticed somebody was opening another checkout, and so I went there, and then I upset everybody. And what I did was I didn't actually go to that person. I said, "Oh, you know what? I'm not doing this," and I went to the self-serve. I just can't do this. Go and queue.
Yeah, let me just ring it up myself. It's so true. And I thought to myself as I was outside, they have like a table right out there with an umbrella, and I was going to stand and eat my sandwich and then continue my walk. And I thought, well, I can't sit here now because they're going to come out. And you get this whole story going in your head. And then I'm like, I walked 5 miles for the sandwich. I really wanted this sandwich. Then you look at the sandwich like, I don't even feel like eating the sandwich now. They think I'm rude. And then I finally had to say, all right, let's just stop. This is ridiculous. But the point is, this is what happens with us, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And probably the woman with all the sandwiches who just probably came from the deli counter, she probably was having a bad day, or she had something going on, or something happened that had nothing to do with me or this other woman. So
I was just about to say that usually, you know, if you get up and you're feeling like you stub your toe, and you got up late, the alarm didn't go off, and like you've started off in a bad day. In the UK we call it got out of bed the wrong side. I'm not quite sure if the Americans have something that's sort of not too dissimilar, but when something keeps going wrong for a person, there is a cliche that would say, oh, you got out of bed the wrong side this morning, because sort of they're on what we call on one, and it's just in their world. And what they're doing is they're antagonistic and angry in their world, and they're sort of throwing that. It's like sort of coming on into your world if you accept it. And this is all about the response and the reaction. How do we respond to that? And is it our stuff to respond to? That's why when I left the queue, I just went and did the self-service, and I got the personal self-service to help me. So I still got served. I wasn't in that queue, and I went about my day. There was obviously something that was in their space that they just wanted to take it out on me, and it is about my responsibility to how much I take on or not, and how I respond to it, and how it affects me on my day.
Yes. And as an extension from what you're saying, I think it's also interesting. We each live in our own environment, whatever that environment is, whomever's with us, or if we're by ourselves. And then someone comes into the environment, or we go into someone else's environment, and the energies change because we're all in different places, feeling different things, going through different things. And when you're so used to having a certain situation and then it changes, sometimes that can be a trigger for people to react or overreact or underreact, whatever the case may be. So what is your recommendation, especially as here in the States, and I know where you are, we're going into fall very soon. I know some places are going into summer, but we're going into fall. And that means there's a lot more opportunity for people to get together with holidays. There's a lot of events, balls, gals, etc. So now, how do we go from being in our own environment to being with others and being able to communicate effectively when we've been locked away, if you will?
This is a really interesting question.
Because why they keep me here? What can I say?
What I would recommend is to wholeheartedly embrace being in the company of others, to literally feel comfortable at expressing and being in that environment of that social experience. Because to be alone for the length of time that we are alone, and then to be in somebody else's space is, I feel that it's quite heavenly, so to be, and I also feel that it makes us respectful of others and respectful of how they're feeling. We are in quite extraordinary times right now, and I can honestly say that we are in extraordinary times on this planet, in all sorts of ways, and none of it's good, none of it's bad, none of it's indifferent. It all simply is. It's always about how we respond, and how we respond creates our reaction. So my invitation to you is to go into your social environments, in terms of your parties and your dinners and your balls and your gatherings, in a space of feeling comfortable to be with other people, and to feel comfortable in that social interaction and engagement, because we are social beings when we allow ourselves to be.
Thank you for sharing that. And I have a follow-up question. So now we're at the event and we're happy to be with others and embracing being with others. And there's a group of us, and one person is dominating the conversation. And it's on a topic that's highly charged, possibly, but they're just taking over the whole conversation. And then you think to yourself, well, it was better when I was by myself because I didn't have to deal with this. So, what can we do? What are some things we can do? Do we walk away? Do we just say, hey, stop talking? Do we talk over the person? What should we do?
Well, there's a couple of things that you can do. One of them is to notice who's not speaking. And when there's a certain point, a perspective or point of view, to actually say, well, what do you think about that, Jessica? Well, it'd be really good to hear from what your perspective is on this, and almost come in at sounding interested in the topic of conversation and bringing in other people, because while you're bringing in someone else, you're shining the light on someone else, because you're not the only person that's feeling like that. Other people will be feeling the same too. And if all else fails and it's uncomfortable for you to be in, to literally say, if you haven't got the energy to do that, this has been fun, I'll catch you all later, I'm going to catch up with a few other people, and literally make your exit. I call that a graceful or a smart exit, so that you feel that you can actually catch up with other people and not feel that experience of being dominated by one person.
Good suggestions. I also like, I'm going to the restroom. Goodbye.
That's
Bye.
Sorry, gotta go.
Not coming back. I've actually done that, believe it or not. I hate to say, I have done it. And then it turns out, let's say it was a woman, and she's like, I have to go to the restroom too. I'm like, oh, now you're going with me.
or the other one is to say, I'm just gonna go to the bar, get a drink, or I'm just gonna top up, and that gives you a nice, it's like a very graceful excuse me. It's a polite, social, graceful, excuse me, I'm just going to do this. Or it might even be, excuse me, I'm just going to get some water. and these are very graceful exits. And when enough people do it, the person is left on their own anyway.
Exactly. They're standing there by themselves. Where'd everybody go? And probably they don't even realize what happened. And so I think that's another subject we've broached before, but it's kind of, at what point do you offer some friendly guidance or just some share with the person? Sort of like if someone will say, hey, why didn't you tell me I have spinach in my teeth? Well, I didn't know if I should, but if someone is dominating the conversation, is there a nice way, a gracious way, not at that moment, but at another time, to say, hey, I just want to let you know when we were at XYZ function, or I've noticed when we're together that you sort of have a lot to say, which is really important. I'd love to be able to share my thoughts as well. That's a tough one, but what are your thoughts about that kind of dance?
Oh, that's a sticky one. Because the person doesn't usually realize. And that's the perspective that's important to acknowledge, that the person might just not be aware. And then it's a different, then you feel different for them. Then you're feeling like sort of, oh, this is not somebody who's dominating. And sometimes people speak lots when they're nervous.
Very true. Or when
So,
they're not heard at home.
sorry?
When they're not heard at home,
Yes.
when no one's listening to them at home.
Yeah, that's another one. So it's important to understand why, and to almost get the person on one side, and speak to them in a place from respectful understanding, rather than from a place of you did wrong. Because if you're going in saying you're doing something wrong, they're immediately on the defensive.
Yes.
So then that doesn't make for a great conversation. It could be that you introduce that subject matter as talking about somebody else. I always like the perspective of taking it away from the person and saying, when we were talking with so and so, did you notice how she dominated the conversation? And usually we get into a place of awareness because of the similarities. So you can share perspectives on someone else, and then they get the message in a different way, in a kinder way, more graceful way. But yes, there is different ways to approach it without really terribly offending the person. Because as soon as you go into you're wrong and I'm right, then that puts the person on the back foot, and they're going to be in a self-defense mechanism and a self-defense response mechanism to you, and that doesn't bode well. So better not to embarrass them in front of everybody. But I have seen in the past where somebody's dominating a conversation, and I have seen very eloquently executed. There's one person that notices that there's a few people in the group that aren't saying anything, and so they'll say, well, what are your thoughts about that, Dorothy? And they'll say, and what do you think about that? What would you do in that situation? And so there's almost like a peacemaker, I call them,
Yes.
that sort of brings in the other people. And we all know one of those kinds of people that will bring somebody in. And it's that response, that kind, graceful interaction. And if you've done any training in networking, which I've done lots of training in networking, these are skills that we're taught to make sure that if there's somebody that's on their own, to make sure that they're not on their own. They might be uncomfortable, they might be nervous, or they might be chatting so much that everybody's walking away from them. And so to and how to
she won't stop talking, right?
and how to handle each type of person. But it's very, very interesting to look at these behaviors, because they really are behaviors.
It's so true. I think to myself, the person who's been cooped up or they don't have anyone listening to them at home, I liken it to like a can of tuna. You have to pull back the thing. So instead of ripping it off, right, you pull it off slowly, and they're like, blah, blah, blah. And then, blah, blah, blah. They're like, they just jump out of the can. And it's like, oh my gosh, we can't put you back in the can. What are we going to do? But that is a great technique. I use that one as well. Caroline, I really appreciate what you're saying here. I'd love to hear from Susan as well. Susan, what are your thoughts about XYZ? And then you get people involved in the conversation. That happens a lot in sales meetings, at least meetings I've been a part of, where the same people every Monday would, and you think to yourself, I dread this meeting because I can't get a word in edgewise, and probably no one cares anyway, because, this guy, and this guy are always doing the talking. But if you have a good leader, they'll see that you need to bring everyone in. And I think also, truthfully, that when the same person keeps speaking all the time, there's so many ways for us to collaborate as people that we need to hear from everyone. Everyone's perspective is important.
Well, when somebody's quiet, it doesn't mean to say that they don't have anything to say.
It's true.
Might be that they're waiting for a place to say, and they feel that they need to have the invitation to say something. And so in meetings, we call that the chairman's role, the chairperson's role, to make sure that everybody has a place that they can come in and say something. You know, if they haven't said something, that they have an opportunity to voice anything that comes up that they want to say and input into the conversation. And that's a good chairman's role, to be able to do something like that, or chairperson's role, being politically correct.
Absolutely. But, you know, something that you just mentioned, it really kind of brought an idea to mind, which is typically when you're in meetings, someone's speaking and someone else has something to say, and they're waiting for the very second that person stops speaking so that they can jump in. So many times, at least in my corporate experience over decades, people really weren't listening to each other because there was no silence. As soon as one person stopped talking, somebody else started talking, and it might not have anything to do with the first person said. It's just the second person's been waiting here, like waiting to jump on on the bandwagon to speak. And I think that in situations where people actually are not worried about control, it's not about who's in charge, who's right, who's wrong. It's really about collaborating. Like on this show, all of our shows, you don't see me cutting people off to come in with a comment. We wait, we're respectful of each other, and then we comment. But too often I've seen where there is no actual thinking or really paying attention to what the other person's saying, because we're so anxious to share what it is that we have to share, because we have to share it at this very moment.
When that's going on, when the person is preoccupied with thinking about how they can get their point across and waiting, they're actually not listening. They're waiting to have their perspective heard. And so they're preoccupied with thinking about, how am I going to get what I want to say in at the time so that everybody hears me? And while all that's going on, they're just not engaged in listening.
It's very true. And I have to be honest, I can think earlier in my sales career that, you know, you'd be meeting face to face and I would think, oh, wow, I have a great one. I've got a really great comment right now. This is a super fabulous, great comment. And then I'd never get to say the comment because other people were talking, and I'd leave and I think, how can I get that comment heard? Maybe I'll go tell my boss about the comment now because it's so amazing, mind blowing. And then I would go up and share the comment. And later I would think to myself, that was so stupid. That was all ego based. That comment was not that important. But this is what we do to ourselves. And so I have taken the time over, you know, decade plus to work on myself and my listening skills and realize that it's not about having the last word, and it's not about being right. It's about being kind. It's about being present. It's about giving the other person an opportunity to share what they have to share without judging them, without interrupting them, and without providing a solution. That's the one that really, it's so, I see it all the time. Well, I have the answer. I didn't ask for the answer. I just asked you to listen. Why can't you listen? Why do you have to solve it? I don't need solving. I'm not a puzzle. Why do people do that, Caroline?
It's because in their normal daily work, they're problem solving. So in their daily activity from, you know, maybe 7 a.m. or 9 a.m, it just depends on, you know, what kind of job that you have, till 5, 6, 7 in the evening, they're problem solving and they're being very analytical, very alert. And so they go home into their personal life and they're still doing the same thing. But in business, usually it is about problem solving and the personal stuff doesn't get there. And so they will shine in that problem-solving environment. But this is where it affects the personal situations, the social, the family, the relationships, the friendships. That's when it causes a problem, because sometimes we just want to be heard. We just want to say what we have to say and to be heard. And once, especially the feminine energy, just has lots of words and they just want to express everything that they need to say without you finding a solution. And once they've said it all, they've kind of got it off their chest. And then that's it. That's the job done. And so they really require you to listen rather than to listen, looking and listening for the problems and working out what to say to solve them. All they wanted you to do was listen.
Thank you. And something else to the point you just made, I think when you are sharing something and you're looking for someone to just be a listener and they provide a solution, if you're listening, you can actually learn a lot about that person and their perspective about you and what they think it is you're doing or not doing. Because people, they'll provide a solution, usually, typically based on what they would do, what they think's right for you. And that's where the whole idea of the solution has to be thrown out the door, because they're looking at it through their eyes and judging about what you should do based on what they think you should do or based on what they would do, but not what you think is best for you. If I come to you and I say, Caroline, I've made a decision to do XYZ, what are your thoughts about it? Well, that's a different situation. I've opened the door for you to give your opinion. But if I just said, Caroline, I've made the decision to do this and I'm going to start doing it on this day, I didn't ask for your opinion about what, but you might think to yourself, well, that's surely a mistake. I need to tell her because I have to save her.
We all see things from different places because we are all different. If we were made like robots, if we're all the same, then we would see things in that same way. But we're not. And our relationships are such that they will challenge us at times, and sometimes we'll be in unison with the person. Sometimes we're not. But those challenges are times that we can actually grow through and become closer to the person and develop a closer relationship. And so sometimes when we do have a difference of opinion or don't see it, these are times that we can grow that friendship, that relationship, that business colleague relationship, rather than feeling that it's all wrong. Sometimes through that challenge can come intense and better relationships.
Yes, I agree with you. And I'm hoping that our audience is really taking away some tips, some strategies, some thought provoking ideas about how each of us can be a more effective communicator. And again, it's one person at a time. It's each of us saying, okay, this is an area where I need some work. And now I'm aware of it. I think that's the most important thing, is the awareness of our behavior. Not that we're going to be 100% in alignment with doing the right thing in terms of being a good listener, but at least we're aware of it. And when we do those patterns of behavior, we think, oh, whoops, I just walked into that one again. Let me take a step back. We're aware of it, and then we can self-correct.
That's beautiful, because that is exactly what it's all about. In awareness, we become our own witness. And when we witness when things aren't working for ourselves, we can then change it because we are aware of when it goes wrong. And that's at the point that change can happen. And we can only make that change when we're completely present to ourselves, the situation, and the other person. And so it requires us to be listening actively, compassionately, and with our hearts.
Beautiful way to wrap up this show, Caroline. Thank you. I also want to just congratulate you on completing your first episode of Talking Heads. And for those of you who have not seen it yet, please go over to our YouTube channel. Caroline has her own playlist, Talking Heads, Caroline Heward, and also Talking Heads 2022. You can find all of our Talking Heads over there. Caroline, tell our audience, what is it that you're presenting on for this set of topics, and when do you present?
I present on a Tuesday at 5 o'clock British Summer Time. I'm not quite sure what it is in American time, but it's British Summer Time, 5 p.m. And I'm looking at the healing the emotional body through the different chakras. So this week's episode was on the root chakra. And this upcoming episode on Tuesday next week will be on the sacral chakra. That's the second chakra, also known as the sexual chakra. So our relationship center. So I'm giving you a little bit of what's going on. You might have a few more tune in, and why relationships don't work and why they do work. And it is insights, awareness, understanding, and also through those insights and awareness, it is actually a healing journey and giving you some insights as to why different symptoms are occurring in the various places in your life, why they're occurring, and what issues you're not resolving in your life, what's causing those problems. It is an insightful and an interesting journey, and I'll be challenging you to move through each chakra with me every Tuesday at 5 p.m.
Thank you, Caroline. Can you please let people know how to contact you and how can they hire you so they can start sleeping better and feeling better?
Yes, you can contact me on NoMoreStress at live.co.uk. That's the best way to contact me. Drop me an email, reach out to me via email initially, and let me know what the problems are that you want help with and the best time, and we will schedule a free Zoom or Skype consultation. If you prefer it by call, then I can give you the numbers and we can do it that way, whatever is easiest for you. But reach out if you are having any problems with stress in your life, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, behavioural. Best way on my email, and then we can schedule a time that works for you and to me.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And please, I really encourage people, do reach out to Caroline. She's extremely experienced. She's very professional. She's going to help you. Don't be afraid. People are afraid to ask for help. And that's what this platform is about: education, inspiration, a little bit of entertainment, and a lot of hope. So
We sure do have a laugh here.
We definitely have some fun here for sure. Our next show is coming up. It's Talking Heads, and it's going to be my presentation as my series on how to start your business continues. And today we'll be discussing the number one reason why most businesses fail. All right. Thank you again. Caroline and I are signing off for now, and you can find us here. You can also find us on our playlist, The Listening Mentor, over on USA Global TV and radio. Thanks for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.